All right, good evening. Thank you for being here. And I'm sorry that I missed the last couple of meetings, but I'm glad to be here tonight and to hear your feedback on the strategic plan that was presented at the last meeting. I'll be curious about the process and how you found the experience in terms of interacting with the Google Docs and how things have been set up, because this is just the first of many things to come. And so I'll be curious to get some feedback from you of what the working process was like for you in ways that we can improve it. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I anticipate coming to you in May, which I expect to be the Canine policy. And then we can talk through, I envision providing you some documents and materials ahead of time so that you'll have some opportunity to review that before the actual meeting and the presentation, so you might find that helpful. But again, I'll be curious on some of your feedback about that and what that process might look like. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But first, let's move through the minutes. Does everyone get an opportunity to review the minutes of the last meeting? And does anyone have a motion to approve the minutes from the March meeting? Got a motion from whichever one you want. We'll get to Eugene and Mr. Sheldon. All in favor? Aye. Oh, yes, sorry.
And it's my fault because I did not review the minutes before coming to the meeting, but I'm just curious because there were some questions or documents that were requested at the strategic planning meeting. I know Manuel asked, like, can we get some kind of background information and more that. I don't remember the exact language, but I'm curious if that is reflected in the minutes.
Do we have the minutes here to answer the question? So someone had requested some documents.
I think, I listed those because they wanted the stipulation, they wanted the
It was very
21st.
specific to the strategic plan. Like, I think, because when we went around the room with each one group, and they were like, well, it's very vague language, we would love to see more like how, I guess, the information behind it, more context.
I want to say, Mr. Burr, you can clarify, wasn't it the 21st policing report that you wanted and that was added as well to?
So in your email that you sent out subsequently with the Google Drive access and everything, those documents were in there, which was the stipulated judgment and the 21st century policing report. And then there was like 2 other documents which I just did not name off the top of my head. We assume that those were the documents that helped to inform you for your strategic plan. And then that was part of the bigger discussion of us either trying to figure out how those documents inform your strategic plan,
Okay.
or whether you had something in addition to that you very much were able to show this is how we arrived at those elements. And that was part of the back and forward that we had as a group. And I know that in my group, looking at our particular strategic goal, we went through it, stipulated judgment and the 21st century policing report, finding elements to then sort of put under those banners as where we found that elements. And that
Some alignment.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Does that answer?
Okay, yeah, just making sure it was reflected on the minutes.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other corrections or additions or anything else that need to be made with regard to the minutes? If not, we'll take a vote. So all in favor to approve, aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? 1. Okay, 1 abstention. All right, thank you very much. Can you pull up? We'll move on to your feedback now from the strategic plan. And I don't know what form that it is in, but I thought that we would just kind of start going through it, and then there can be some Q&A here to make sure that we're clear on what it is that you were recommending, or maybe there's some areas that we can provide some clarification on as well.
And then this is where the first comment is made, and this is Kathleen.
Okay, one objective was to broaden community. Is that an addition or is that a comment?
I believe that's her comment.
No, but this is not an addition.
No, yes, this is her comment.
I would recommend more meetings which deliberately invite those who are critical of BBD to come. Stipulated judgment says about their need to meet critics and not seeing events like this described. This would relate to the statement here, increasing trust. So, I'm trying to think about how we would go about doing that specifically.
I can add,
Yeah, for sure, sorry.
Maybe you have a topic that people are concerned about, like when you did the one about can you take videos? You know, it's something where there's a topic that people that know are unhappy about.
That's what I was trying to figure out, would it be a topic-related meeting
Well, that was my
that
idea.
people would come to, or would it be a reach out to invite a particular group?
Well, either one, both.
Okay. Okay, next comment? Ryan, you tracking our conversation a little bit, because what we'll do is we'll go back and digest this too, and see where we can work in your recommendations into the plan, and then whatever we ultimately decide, we'll give you feedback on it as well. I anticipate providing you feedback. How I envision this going forward would be tonight, us kind of reviewing what your recommendations are, us going back, working together, incorporating what we can into the plan. Whatever we do or don't do, I figured my plan would be to respond back to you at the next meeting and report out to you elements that we considered, elements that we adopted, things that we didn't, and give you some explanation and some understanding as to why. So that there's that feedback. It's not just you telling us, okay, thank you, and we go, thank you very much, but there's actually some feedback, and we have that sort of discussion process.
Question, do we
Yeah.
have a little bit more time for this? Because I know part of what we agreed on from the last meeting was that each work group was gonna follow up and finalize their section. We didn't convene as a group, some of us were on vacation
Yeah.
and stuff, and it was hard to get together, so we would like some more time as a work group, a whole month.
Okay.
To have some comments outside of what's already added there, so is there like a deadline to submit our?
Well, yeah, so let me hear a little bit more about your process, then about your work after the meeting. How many different groups were developed to work through the plan?
Each goal had a work group.
Each goal had a work group. Okay, so there were, okay. And other than what you just said, who didn't meet, or did the other groups meet? Do you feel like you had enough time to work through the plan and work through with your group members, or do some of the other groups feel like you need more time as well?
I wasn't assigned to the group, and because I wasn't here either.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to figure out the communication for those that aren't at the meeting, and put them in contact with somebody so that you can decide which one you want to participate in. Because this is really a good step to work through this process, because it's going to be much more of this to come. So let me just ask again, do you as the panel feel like you need more time to work on this?
I'll say yes.
Okay. Okay, think about how much time you need as we'll kind of review what's here tonight. And then that gives us, at least on the fly, a little bit of an assessment of how much time we would need to already address whatever feedback you've given us. And then we can kind of work together to figure out how much more time might be appropriate to get through this. Okay. Next comment. Oh, yeah. All right. Take steps to ensure that all contact is truly consensual and that no arrest, searches, or occurs. Okay, the context of this is, go back up a little bit. So this is the objectives of unprompted face-to-face contact.
And this is more, I think, from us as we were discussing our coffee with the cops, popping up at different locations kind of thing. That was more what this wording, and so I think this was.
The context of making that where it's not an enforcement thing. Yes?
He actually shared that with us.
Okay.
He was actually thinking more about some community meetings. Like if you have a meeting, people can, and they didn't know they can do it. That's no problem. But they would know they weren't going to be arrested probably.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I would share that it's kind of counterproductive to the process.
Yes. I didn't think you would, but
Yeah, no, that's good, that's good. Okay? Well, before I go too much further, any of our, Ryan, Nancy, or Karina, or our staff, do you have any, stop me if you have some questions and want to clarify anything as well. Why isn't this Article 4? What is Goal 4? Ryan, you want to speak to some of this on the fly, maybe?
Yeah, so goal 4 is engage the community advisory panel, utilize community surveys and other feedback tools.
Subjective 3, develop. Okay.
That's goal 1, that's our goal group actually, that's goal 1 and it's objective 4, I think.
I think you,
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to go back and read the entirety of the document, and I think we can figure out what the context and what it is that you're trying to share.
So I guess the question is like, what is helpful ways for you guys to receive our?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. As the different work groups were doing your work, did you have a plan of how you were gonna submit? Was each group going to have a representative that would make comments? Were you just all individually gonna make comments? Or were you gonna have each group have its own set of comments and recommendations?
So work, sorry, go ahead.
It was kind of a loosely organized,
Yeah.
meeting. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of discussion about whether we should just be one group or whether we should spread out after we address each objective, because objective number 1 was taking a significant amount of time, and the other objectives were kind of resolved or at least discussed fairly quickly. So it was very informal, and
Okay.
I don't think we really decided that as far as a group. So we kind of just chose an objective that we felt fit within our, maybe area that we wanted to work on.
That's what I was gonna say.
expertise, Or something like that, discussed it, and then we, kind of came back together. But it was kind of very informal and very, not, I don't want to say organized, but.
Was that,
It was tough to organize.
was that made on the fly at the meeting, or was this conversations afterwards?
Yes, so I'm just discussing about the
At the
lead
meeting.
at the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
I have I'm trying not to be confused. So we have goals, which are 4. We have 4 goals, right? And within some of those goals, there are different objectives in those goals. So when we say objectives, I'm confused as to what goals you're talking about, because I'm really trying not to confuse myself.
Yeah.
So,
We should make
and
clear what
within-
goal we're talking about.
Yes.
And what objectives within that goal.
Yes,
Can do that.
so we can, so I'm not confused, because I'm hearing objectives, but I'm not hearing goals, for each of these goals have some form of objectives on it.
We're in goal 1.
Okay.
Very important. But I guess,
Okay,
and then, I think what would be helpful, and it's unfortunate,
Yeah.
a lot of people are still out. From the last meeting, there were maybe people out as well. And so I think, what we agreed on was that people were going to self-assign themselves for each section, and divided by the goals, right, at which area you wanted to work in. I think there was no, like, from the start off, there was no agreement as to that you were gonna stay in that work group or you were going to change later. But I think at the end, and I know, T. Johnson and others will also agree, that like, I don't think we should, like, I don't think it's, possible to say that as a large group within one of the four strategic platforms, we should stay within our work group. And I left with the assumption that we're gonna stay in each work group, like I was gonna say in goal 1, and we're gonna review, make recommendation, and we can share out some of our final recommendation at the final meeting, and each group can do that. And I think what we said was that people were welcome to review, on the larger documents, and if they wanted to make additional stuff, but they were gonna stick within their work group.
Yeah, if I could offer a suggestion, because I think you asked what we would be looking for something like this, I would, my advice, if I can say that, it would be to divide it into the 4 goals and have a group for each one. what I would like back is a recommendation on goal 1 from group 1. Collectively, this is your group's recommendation, and it be a separate document. So that we can move through that, so that we can be very intentional about and not miss things, because it's very easy as comments are made in a document, especially when you get documents that are very long, it's very easy to get confused and that can get lost. Going forward, in some of the policies, like canine policy, I don't know exactly how long it is. You have an estimate of how long it is? I can't remember.
Less than 20 pages.
Ryan, yeah, the proposed policy that's coming. It's pretty lengthy.
Yeah, it's-
So, yeah, it's pretty lengthy, and so I think it will be helpful to somehow, and we can do that in the meetings, this is kind of the structure of it, and you guys can self-assign, but I think it would be helpful to make those assignments clear, so that when you leave and you go out in between the meetings, that the groups are working independently, but working on a very specific thing. Because what we would like, it would be much easier for us to get back, is like I said, a single recommendation for this one from each group, and then for the canine policy, whoever's going to be in this particular section, to have a recommendation for this section from this group. That's how we would like it back, because it would be easier for us to facilitate a conversation and dialogue and review of this. But I also don't really have an intention of telling you how to go about your work. But I want to participate with you in trying to figure out what might work for everyone, because I so much appreciate your willingness to serve in this, and I know you all have lives, and this takes a lot of time as well. I want to do what we can to really make it clear when you leave here that it's not a mystery. Everybody knows kind of what group they're in and what they're working on, and then the 4 or 5 can communicate together who's going to be the sort of author of the recommendations for the group. And I think that will help it stay organized, and we can flow through this work that's important, but it's going to take a lot of time to do that if we don't have established some organization. And because people have different roles, people have different interests, and will really want to take a lead role in certain aspects of this in the different policies. And so I do think that at the meetings, when the presentations are made, when the sort of the work is going to begin, that there is some clarity about who's going to do what and how we're going to do that, because it will be very helpful to the police department staff to get a concise or a set of written recommendations for this policy, or a set of recommendations for this section of the policy, and then this section of the policy, rather than just everyone kind of contributing to it, because it makes the context very difficult to follow. Yes?
I think there was also some confusion because before, we were given this, but I don't think we had everybody had the stipulated judgment. So just for clarification, the stipulated judgment is a bunch of different components, and community engagement is just one aspect that we're starting to engage as what is indicated in here. So this is kind of our guide, this is like an overall guide.
Yes.
And then we're taking individual facets within this guide to address, and then kind of check that off our list, and then we're gonna go to another one. Is that?
Yeah, there's like 166 paragraphs throughout that document, right?
Right.
That lay across the entirety of the organization in many, many different areas. The strategic plan is one, it may be in several of the paragraphs, but it certainly is contained within certain areas of the stipulated judgment. And it says very specifically about, or gives some idea of what that's supposed to, that engagement or a community policing plan. It's worded differently in different places. But yes, the stipulated judgment should be a guide for you when you're doing policy review. We're going to give you other materials that we've reviewed to prepare and develop proposals for our policy. We're going to give you those materials as well. But the stipulated judgment, the 21st century policing document, other policies that we're going to present to you that we've reviewed and considered as part of the development of our policy, we're going to give you all of that. But one of the elements of your recommendations back is it consistent with what the stipulated judgment requires? That's a very important question that we need your input on to evaluate this plan, to evaluate the policy. Is it consistent with what the stipulated judgment says that it should require? Now, some areas of the stipulated judgment are less specific than others, and it kind of develops some themes that they want to see within the police department, and so you'll have to kind of assess that on your own. But there's also going to be other materials and other best practices and other organizations, other agencies that we've adopted or considered as part of our policies that we're going to give you that. And you'll have to really work to make your assessment of that. And does our policy that we're proposing to you reflect the changes that are required in the stipulated judgment? But then beyond that, does it reflect good practice and best practice across the profession? Are there some other elements that may not be addressed here that we should consider because they're best practices and they're successful in other organizations and things like that? That's what I would be looking for you in your work that you do on policies and things like that.
So one of the things that I'm sure you've gone over this and know how you're going to address these things, and that's where this information has come from. So, if you know, in the future, if you align it with what area, it might also give us a more information
Yep.
to judge by, oh,
Agreed.
okay, I see this aligns with
Yeah,
this page and this section, and then we can,
totally agree. We're on the same page.
okay.
So when the policy for the Canine comes, you're going to get our current policy, you're going to get the proposed policy, you're going to get whatever source documents that we have or information that we have previously reviewed. You already have the stipulated judgment, but we'll line out and identify the specific page numbers and paragraphs of the stipulated judgment that deal with the Canine policy. And you'll have that all kind of come as a package.
And I think that just was some of the confusion before.
Totally
We
agree.
just didn't,
Yeah.
but now seeing the scope of the
Yeah.
work, I think it is a little clear, at least it's clear to me.
Are there any other questions about that, about the process or the structure of that? Because the stipulated judgment is what you're going to use for all of your policy reviews. We intend to, when we give you a policy package, that it will contain those relevant things that we use, the proposed policy, but we'll also isolate in that package and identify for you where in the stipulated judgment this is referenced, like page number and paragraph number. Okay, let's go through. What steps would be taken to ensure this complies with the, how will this integrate with duties investigated? Generate programs based on, where's that comment? Reference to easy access point? Steps would be taken to ensure, okay, I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit, because I'm not sure the scope of that. Anybody have any information what he might be talking about specifically?
I'm sorry, which
We
one?
didn't hear.
He's asking what steps would be taken to ensure this complies with the requirements of the stipulated judgment. I'm not sure what this is. If it's the access point, or how will this integrate with duties to investigate and report? Great, easy. So that might
An
be
easy
what
access
he's talking
point.
about from right here.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, we can answer that. That makes sense to me. This is entirely too broad. Who defines community needs? Very good point. You can't generate programs based on those needs if they're reliable. Okay. Agreed?
So Jacob is part of our work group, once you go back and just package, like you said, package all of our recommendations, all one. I think what we were wondering was like, do you just want comments on the side, or because we wanna do line edits of saying like, I think you have 8 objectives, and I think they could be merged into like 4 or 5.
Okay.
And those are the kind of recommendations, line item recommendations. So I wasn't sure if you guys were open to that or just wanted comments on the side.
Like I said, what I would refer is, just like for instance, for this, since you've separated into 4 groups, is that right?
Goal 1, there's 4 people in goal 1,
Okay.
but goal 1 has 8 objectives.
So how many people are in, is somebody in all of the other goal groups? How many groups are there?
4.
There are 4 groups,
Yeah.
okay. So regarding this document, I would like 4 recommendations. Goal 1 recommendation, a goal 2 recommendation. Now, whether you submit a single document that has all the recommendations, or you go and you do line edits for goal 1 with those recommendations in there. I'm not sure that I really have a preference. I don't know if any of you guys do. So I would leave that up to you. But I would like, so that we can digest it in its context, each group to have its own set of recommendations.
Okay.
Part of the reason why, for our group, we had 3 elements that we wanted to address. One, look into the source documents and find justification to fit in terms of alignment for expectations. Secondly, make revisions in terms of language that we think are recommended, and then questions that you may have in general. So we just sort of threw that on there with the expectation that you would then review it and then be able to give us context.
Yeah.
Like we have youth intervention and prevention programs. Are we even in the same ballpark is kind of what we were saying.
Of what a youth intervention
Exactly,
program
in
is?
terms of what you thought when we were creating this draft plan.
Okay.
And so that was the idea that for our group number 3 that we were putting together. So hence, we would value that feedback to know like,
Yeah.
are we on the right path here?
Yeah.
Because we certainly found elements in the stipulation, as well as in 21st century policing report. But again,
Mhm.
we want to hear from you guys. Is this what we were thinking when we were thinking of these goals?
So I think how you articulate that, I think it would be helpful to get that when your group submits recommendations, that these are recommendations for the plan specifically, these are some edits or things that you could merge or whatever else, and then these are the questions that we have. That would be really helpful, so that we could be responsive to a very specific question. That would be very helpful.
I might suggest on that too, but if you're already in the process of working on this and we're gonna be working on deadlines, please reach out to myself directly for your subgroups to figure out any question and answers we move forward to get this going. So we don't have to wait for a meeting, we can go.
For sure. Yes?
No, no.
Oh, sorry. Okay, okay. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. I think I understand what yeah.
This was, because we had to copy it from Canva to put it in a Word
So it
doc.
duplicated?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Same mission probably. Events need to be more clearly defined, doubling the number of units. Okay. Yeah, I guess we could clarify a community event or I don't, did you find, let me ask you, he raises a question about the definition of events. Did you find language that you need to, like, or words like that need to be more further defined? Like, would it be helpful to have a definition?
And then a list of different kinds of them.
Yeah. Okay. Because we tried to make sure there's not a lot of police jargon and those kinds of things that are not just used interchangeably all over the place. Okay, we might be able to do that. Contact must be invited and specific measures taken to ensure that the contact is consensual. Oh, that's the use of the word contact, I think. Okay. What, city about engagement? Engagement needs to be entirely free of the first contact. All communication channels is a lot of goals, objective, and okay. Engagement must be more than propaganda. This would require active, responsive engagement. Yeah, I figured that was going to come up at some point. Is the definition of engagement and what it is. And I'm assuming, since he said more than propaganda, that's kind of like just us pumping out information, right? That's not in. That'll leave a mark. He flew away. But and just so you know, engagement from my perspective isn't just simply us standing here somewhere or in a community meeting or in a neighborhood somewhere telling you things and then getting in our cars driving away. It is a dialogue. It is a discussion. It is opportunity for input and where we actually are working together to solve issues and working through things. That's us being intentional about being out into the community and in those kinds of positions. So that's why I was asking about, would it be helpful to, and maybe I would ask you, in the goal groups, when you're giving feedback, if you see something that needs to have a definition, so that we're all working on the same page, highlight that word or identify it for us so that we can work through that. Yeah, it's going. Identify and engage communication channels other than social media. that mean? Any ideas? Any idea what he's talking about? He says identify and engage with communication channels other than social media.
Assume he means not just, that not be.
Like in-person ones or?
More face-to-face, more, maybe walking, you know.
Yeah.
Foot patrols and bike,
Okay.
not patrols.
Not just using technology.
Interaction,
Okay.
community interaction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Walking around the office.
This paragraph merely restates the previous paragraph. Okay, it's an edit thing probably. Many towns that should be closer to which may be more critical, which be reported, which otherwise leaks to outside report, which may be more. Huh?
This is what he said.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. We're still in goal one, right? Isn't it like
It
others,
was 30 more time.
like others mentioned above, must be safe. So at the end, I think we're getting back to sort of the definition. From that. How is this not just a sub-part of goal? Now we're in goal two, okay? Foundation civil judgment to promotion.
Oh, you're on goal 3?
Goal two, I think.
Yeah, we're kind of, so
I'm
you're on goal 2 now?
pretty sure that's goal 3. Is that-
Because I saw you, but I thought it was in goal two.
Okay, goal 3?
I don't think we have any.
Where are we at?
Goal 2 is right there.
Yeah, we're in goal two.
Okay. And then that's where goal 3 starts.
You want to talk about what that is?
No, I'm saying right there is where goal 3 starts, where my comments begin. So
Oh, it does?
Maybe scroll up a little bit, please. Keep going. See, that's where goal 3
Oh,
starts.
okay.
Okay, this is where you changed it, okay.
Okay, all right. You want to talk about what you added?
If you look there, I'm looking at the foundations, which I'm basically citing where I think are the appropriate subsections and where you're pulling that information, where I think it fits.
Okay,
In terms
gotcha.
of youth prevention, intervention programs, right? So I'm looking at the stipulated judgment and the policing reports, and I'm looking at those recommendations from those elements and saying, okay, I think this is what you're getting at in terms of contents.
Okay,
And then any other comments are just that.
okay.
So that was the key thing, is that like our goal is youth prevention, right? And if you read it, it's very broad, it's very general. So we were hoping to make sure that, in essence, this is what you're gonna be looking at, to contextualize it, to be specific in implementing that goal
Got it.
across projects, programs, and other activities.
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's more than some.
Yeah, I mean, that was some questions that we had.
Yeah, this one.
I got this wrong.
Okay, so we have 4 groups. Let's talk about how much time you need. How much more time? Because our next meeting is set for May 9th. Okay. If the groups are able to provide us sort of single sort of recommendations for each group, that will help us be able to move through the document and be responsive to you. We may not be able to do, depending on the timing, we may not be able to do that by May 9th, but we'll do it, we'll catch it up. And we may be in this cycle of, we're working on things, and I think that that's kind of the reality of where we're gonna be, because there's it's only going to get more busier and more technical as we go forward. So, I'm,
I think one of the problems is like goal one has 8 objectives.
Yeah.
Goal two has like 2 objectives, so the amount of work that when we, loosely organized ourselves into these groups, we left a lot of work for group one to do.
Yeah.
Without understanding the
Yeah.
scale.
and I'm okay with this, us figuring out and how to work through this, because that's just the reality of what it is that we're gonna do. That's why I think we intend to give you some documents ahead of time before we have a meeting and have a conversation about it. We're gonna purpose to do that so that we can kind of all be on the same page as we're talking about what's gonna come next. I think that's really important. But but I recognize that there's gonna be some confusion in all of this that we'll have to figure out. But also, like I said, want to do whatever I can to support your working together and dividing up how you're gonna do your work, and support you guys doing that as well. So,
I mean, for group one, I think that is, we would definitely before the night, we will submit our final recommendations for
Okay.
goal one. But I think, well, at the last meeting was a good trial of how to break ourselves, because we were just given the documents and like, oh, okay, we'll talk about it. And so it was just like, let me divide my goals, let me divide by this. So I think now we have a structure, and then, Karina created the Google documents, and so like, okay, now we have a base.
Yep.
You know, and so I think we're building that structure to actually be set up for policy.
and I do think the policies, my advice, again, if I can offer it, I do think it would be helpful to divide the policies up in groups. Because it will be very difficult, a 30-page policy that is kind of, well, I mean, some of it's very technical, some of it's not so much. But I do think it would be helpful to do something very similar. And you're gonna have to, because there'll be certain elements of a certain policy that you're really gonna wanna have input and voice on, and others not so much. And that will be up for you guys to decide how you divide that work. But I do think the division of the labor like that is gonna be helpful.
I think what will be helpful is just if one, if you guys can give us a little bit more instruction from the meeting, and say like, this is the policy, this is what we're using, this is how it's broken up. It's technical, it's reporting, it's whatever, and then so we have a little bit of guidance of how we organize ourselves.
Can you pull up, the Canine policy, our policy manual? You can go to the website.
Well, I mean, also, just
And we'll talk through it right now.
better
Use
now
it as an example.
what this was, I think if we restructure, we might look at that first objective and break it up among the 4 groups instead of putting group one to be the only one, because obviously this is one.
Is this the old one, the current one?
I didn't say combine, I said
I don't know what policy number it is. Brian, do you know what it is, what policy number it is? It's gotta be it's gotta be 300 something.
New one's 310.
Yeah, you can just go through it like. Huh? No, I'm just gonna say, so this is the current canine policy. You can, for the purposes of this conversation, you can see what the structure kind of looks like. So just about every policy is gonna have some initial statements about the policy, kind of what the principles are that it's founded on. It's not gonna have technical language. That will get down into the rest of the policy. So this is the very first page, the purpose and scope of the policy. Then you can go down, then it started getting more technical. Responsibilities of certain individuals when it comes to the canine unit. Go ahead and keep going. We'll just kind of go through some of it. The assignment, what it takes to be assigned, or anything around the assignment to the canine unit, who the canine commander is, what the responsibilities might be, all the different roles of the canine supervisor, the lead trainer responsibilities, how do we handle internal requests for the canine teams, an outside agency requested, what do we do and how do we make those decisions, whether we comply with the request, how the canines are used in public demonstrations, apprehension guidelines, all considerations for deployment, warnings and announcements, directed canine bite, control of the canine. I don't know what page number we're up to, but I wasn't looking, so. We were 130? Okay, so reporting requirements, non-apprehension guidelines. I just kind of wanted to see, let me get an idea of different detection, narcotics, bomb explosives, what that means, how that's defined, how the canine handlers are selected for qualifications, the canine handler responsibilities. So that's good. So you get an idea of all of the policies generally are going to have those kinds of a very early, this is what the philosophy is around this idea, and then it will get very technical throughout division of work for an individual, what that assignment might be, who they are, how they're selected, what a supervisor's responsibilities are, that sort of thing. So I think it might be helpful to do, again, giving you the material ahead of time will help you be able to organize at that meeting of who's going to do what.
I mean, I think I already raised this at previous meetings, but, I don't, so, the canine bill at the state legislature, I'm just wondering on how that would change, like if we spend a whole month on this,
It would change your mind.
and then if it passes, then they just do a 1 month report. So I'm just curious, not to derail our, I don't know, agenda, but is there another policy in the czar office just to make sure that, you know,
No.
yeah, maybe it could be a good practice, maybe we
No,
practice.
it's not. The use of force policies we're in the process now with CCU. So sort of what looks like use of force, canine will be the first policy. And then we haven't made a decision yet whether it's going to be the internal affairs and complaint process, or we get into the use of force policies, and there are six. So my hope is that we would do the canine, then we will do internal affairs, the complaint process, and then get into the use of force policies. And that's what I expect to take us through the rest of the year.
Well, I mean, I raised that, and just to explain what my question and my comment was about, there's a bill at the state legislature that cannot do our canine policy if it passes by summer. So I'm like, okay, we spend a month, 2 months on it, and then we delete it.
It would substantially change it if the bill passes as it stands. Now, the timing of that, I really don't know. Realistically, I don't know what the timing of that and what that is likely, that timeline is likely to be.
Just for the places like stairs, I have that like stairs.
Yeah, so there is a bill, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
But the bill that is, you know, up in the legislature being introduced, it would, cease all use of canines and apprehensions of people.
Yep.
Apprehensions of subjects, right? But it would continue to allow use of canines in searches. So as we're reviewing a canine use of force policy, if that bill passes, like half of that policy is going to post, right?
Yeah, the bill would substantially change use of canine by police in the state, substantially. They would still exist, but it would not be used for apprehensions. Yeah.
We're doing, I know, you would rather be prepared than not. So even if the bill does pass and there's stuff we have to take out, we still have to look at this as if the bill doesn't.
Correct.
Because you don't want to get caught on your feet by not having anything already implemented, waiting on the bill to pass. So I would rather work on, you need to spend a month or two on it, getting it done. If it just so happens a part of human beings, okay, they can't be used for that, but there are other sections in that for searches that we may have to look at too and review and make recommendations on, that's still gonna be in place, so I would rather just go ahead and.
I'm of the same opinion that this is a policy that is ready for revision, ready for implementation, or work through implementation. We're ready to make that policy happen. And so I would rather, yes, I recognize that but if that happens, that's gonna change a lot of things around this and would substantially reduce this. So yeah, I don't wanna waste your time working through things, but the reality is we don't know how long that's gonna take. And we have this policy ready to go, or will have it ready to go, and I would prefer to present it to you and work through it. But all the policies will have similar sections. So that's why I think front-loading you with these proposals before we actually have a meeting, and then you're gonna have somewhat perspective and orientation to be able to assign and divide the work. So, thanks. So, I don't want to unnecessarily extend the meeting tonight, but is there someone here from each of the groups?
That's my question.
So group 1 is here, group 2, 3, 4? Okay, perfect. So groups 2, 3, and 4, did you find that you also need some more time to work through it, to be able to have some consensus and produce some recommendations? Okay. Then I would ask you, how much time do you need?
We probably don't, like group two, like I said, group two only had two objectives. It
Okay.
was group one, so my question, I guess, would be is if we should maybe work on just objective one as far as resolving the question.
I think if group 2, if you're satisfied with your work and you have some recommendations to present, I would ask you to present them, and then maybe join the other team
Okay.
and help facilitate that work getting done. Ryan?
Can I tell you, does everybody have access to the documents? I know Mr. Schultz said you did, but if you don't, and we need to get that rectified by today. So it would need Karina as soon as we break, so we can make sure we figure out whatever we need to do logistically, make sure you have the information.
Okay. Again, how much time? That's the question on the floor. How much time do you need?
30 minutes.
We will need at least 2 weeks to submit our final recommendations.
2 weeks. Okay. Group 2, you're going to be done.
30.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Almost there. Is 2 weeks adequate for the rest of the groups? You feel like you can have time to meet and discuss?
I think by the next meeting, we should be ready for the next meeting.
So that's a month.
So we.
May 9th is the next meeting.
Oh,
So in 2 weeks, I guess, just to get it going and be on the timeline, just submit your final recommendations.
Yeah.
If you don't have any recommendations, then at least put the feedback there so that then you can review that feedback.
Yeah, I would like each group, so we would like back 4 recommendations for each of the different goals, and then we can work through it. It might take us a little bit of subsequent meetings to be responsive back to you on what the final plan is going to look like, but we'll do that. But it will be very helpful for that process if the groups can submit a single recommendation for each group, or a single set.
So I have a couple of questions, actually, I'm a little confused. So when we have the policy this May, how long is going to be policy for? For 2 years or?
So there is no defined set of time, so once a policy is enacted, it stays that way unless a law changes, and then we need to change it. Some other source says that you shouldn't be doing it this way, you should do it this way, and we make a change. But there is no defined timeline that it expires or anything else. That is the policy until we change it. Okay, so I have 2 weeks and I have a month. It's 2 weeks? We'll revisit that then. So what's 2 weeks from today? April 25th. Okay, so what we would ask is that each group have your recommendations submitted by April 25th.
In that document.
in the Google document. It can be its own set, it can be its own document if you'd like. This is group three's recommendations, and it can be a single document, or it can be incorporated into that. However you decide to do that, that would be helpful. Are there other questions about the plan as you've kind of worked through that need clarification, that would be worth spending a few minutes tonight, having staff answer some questions about it?
Yes.
Right.
I do have some questions for clarification,
Okay.
based on comparison to
Okay.
documents.
All right. Let's have it.
Okay, so for example, under the group goal number 2, educating and involving community members in the training of police personnel. This isn't, when you say, community members attend community, or number of community members who participate in training and courses and topics taught by community members. What exactly does that mean? Are you talking about sources of education like through colleges? Are you looking for
So I think that's one of the
training?
measurements, isn't it? One of how
Yeah.
we're gonna measure our
Yes.
success.
Correct.
So how many, I think it's all of that. We have community members that come in and speak to the police academy and teach different things. We have community members come and do different kinds of training within the police department. So that is gonna be one of the things that we measure of, are we engaging, and that's one element of it. Are we allowing or asking or partnering with community members, could be organizations, could be college, could be an individual, could be a business, coming in and participating in training, presenting training, or attending training with us. And that's the full context of us measuring in that narrow area.
Okay, so perhaps in order to be more clear, we can provide examples. Like, for example, in our last academy, we had, are you talking about academy training? Are you talking about the annual police training?
All
Okay, and
how we as an organization do that. Yeah.
And so, again, examples, for example, like, to reference, to say, okay, this is an example of the trainings that we use community members for, and this is the benefit that the officers receive from attending. But in order to measure, we have to know what it is. And from this document, we don't have an idea.
Well, I think, and I'll have to look at the context, I think that is how we're going to measure it, right? Is, are we doing this? Yes, we are. How do you know? Because this, over in 2023, these different presentations, training, all this happened, that is our measurement. That is our proof that we did that particular thing. It's not, you're not measuring did we do it with this group, it's did we do it, and we would be reporting out that yes, we fulfilled this goal by these sets of trainings, date, time, and location, wherever else.
Right.
That's, I'm not sure we're connected.
Yeah, I know, I might not be.
Because that is a, how we're going to measure whether we're doing this or not.
So the bottom piece is basically for you guys and if you're meeting this goal.
Yes.
So for us right now, not looking at that's for them.
Yeah, because we haven't met the goal yet.
Okay.
We're developing the plan that we're going to do this, and how are you gonna know you're doing it? Well, by measuring all of these things.
Okay.
So I would ask you, are there some things that we should be measuring that aren't there to prove completion of that goal?
And I think, just to touch on that, I think the methodology behind these metrics would be explaining with follow-up report, like, these were our metrics, this is how we went about it, and these are examples, and these are the types of events that we're having.
So what would be coming is a community report saying, on our strategic plan in this particular goal, the goal was to have community members participate in training. How do we know we did that? Well, here's all of the different ways that occurred. So in that plan is some very specific things that we've identified that how we're going to measure whether we're doing this or not. Now, I would agree. I think, because I feel like we were asking you to measure that, and you don't have any information to measure.
Right, I'm trying to figure, like, it seems very broad, and what is the target goal? What kind of trainings, what are you targeting as examples?
Yes.
To demonstrate how you're going to hit these objectives.
And that's what I would ask you, what specifically is missing there that we should have as one of our measurements? That's not listed, or, like you said, maybe it's too broad. And we
Well,
can
and I'm
narrow
not
it.
saying it's broad, but it's just, vague in that when I first looked at this, I
Okay.
couldn't see what I couldn't really tell the objective. I mean, I understand, but like how, what that looked like. I understand what your objective is, but I didn't get any reference as to what that's gonna look like. Like, we're gonna call in X and they're gonna give us Z, and this will improve the officers, you know, on the streets by doing this.
Yeah,
You see what I'm
so,
saying?
yeah, we didn't go that far. That's true, and that's why I would ask your input is, if you're gonna measure your engagement in this particular goal, and we have some identified bullet points of how we think we're gonna measure that, I would ask you if that's not adequate, if you think we should expand it, if we should be more specific to target, or strategize to have very specific engagement and training done. I mean, that could be some of your input as well.
Is
Right,
there-
so you could align it to maybe some of the
Yeah.
aspects that are in the
For sure.
stipulated judgment. If you align those things, and then we plan.
And that's what I would ask from you is, what's missing that would make it in alignment with the goal, with the stipulated judgment? That's what I would ask you.
And is there a way to get, that would be helpful, the training community members have done for you guys, even in the past? So what's the
Probably.
topics?
Yeah.
So we
yeah.
know
Just
that,
to say-
okay,
Whether it's academy or whether, yeah, we can
Yeah.
give you categories of it for sure.
yes,
I mean, I know.
Can you make a note of that, Ryan or Dan?
that would be helpful.
Right.
Because then when we go through the stipulated judgment,
Right,
we can see what
because
has been covered.
there's a specific area in here that speaks to training and education of officers. And specific areas of that need to be addressed, but that doesn't, so I didn't know if that was going to be a separate part, or if that was also going to be in
No,
part of.
no, it would be officer training very specific in some of those areas. It's not going to be the context of a community engagement plan.
Right.
That's going to be something different. That will reveal itself in different policies as we come forward with promotion process or a variety of other things that will ultimately come to you. So this strategic plan is narrowly focused somewhat on the steps of the police department to engage with the community.
Yes.
Officer training and all those other elements, that's gonna come with other work that you're gonna do in the months to
Right.
come.
And that was some of the confusion,
Yeah, it will not be inclusive of that.
Okay.
It is really a community engagement plan. And our work to accomplish identified goals and how we envision how we would measure that. And so I would ask you, what's missing from that measurement list?
Just to add a little bit, so that was the whole point that we were doing, we were trying to ground it within those documents.
and that's, yes,
That's where you provide the context. So to give like an example, like for goal 3, objective 1, continue to grow the GPA, which is the Junior Police Academy program. I went through all the documents, and then I found the elements that I think would fit underneath that banner. One of them is the recruitment of the diverse minority recruitment in the Bakersfield Police Department, right? Hence, programs like that are one that have to come in the pipeline to be able to recruit a greater police force that is diverse and representative of the community. Hence, I'm putting that in there with the idea being that that would be addressing one of those elements of stipulated judgment, in addition to many others. So I think it's very much impetus on the groups to find those things and
Right.
say, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we expect to be addressed here.
right.
In goal 3, they're talking about youth programs, diversion programs, rehabilitation programs. Look at those documents as we did on your goal and try to find that context where you're very much telling BPD. So your goals are here, your outcomes in terms of what you expect to measure, but we would expect all of us to be addressing these in particular.
Right. It was just because goal 2 discussed training education, and there's a different area that also speaks to training and education, but I think it's outside of.
Yeah, the scope, it's outside the scope of that plan.
So that was where my confusion
Got it.
was, and was.
That makes sense. Okay.
So there's 2 educational components in the stipulated judgment.
Well,
Because like when you get to recruitment of other things, you're gonna see again, the things that we're doing through JPA, through all this to try to create these pipelines and put it,
Wanting people to know.
correct, and position us to engage, to develop that workforce. This is narrowly focused on the community relations unit, a lot of it, and then strategically across the organization, how we are going to engage, what that means, and we've tried to describe what, for us, what engagement looks like, and then how we're gonna measure that, whether we're accomplishing that. So I would ask you, does it make sense that, are we on the right page and an understanding of what engagement is? And these kinds of activities will be the definition of engagement, the behaviors, the articulation of engagement, and then how we're measuring that, how we're going to conclude whether we've engaged or not, is by measuring all of these different things. And so I would ask you, are there elements missing that we should be measuring, that we haven't thought about to judge our engagement? Any other questions about your different sections that you're working on that you need clarity or have questions about at all? Yes, Kathleen?
Just a little bit about, on goal and objective 3 about community feedback portal. I wonder what exists, like, I was just part of it again recently, and we went back and talked to a person who has the capture. And I just wondered if you could have, we actually have someone who always goes out and follows up, so she was not real nice. So it was, that they would go back and say, well, what did it work? Is it kind of people, did your people in your neighborhood like this or not? Was there work for them? I mean, I just, that's something to write down as a suggestion.
Yes. Any other questions about the plan? So the groups are planning to submit their recommendations by April 25th. Okay. You can submit them on Google Docs. Do you have the information from us that you need to finish your work for this particular item? Okay. Okay. Ryan, Randy, you guys have anything?
No, and the questions that you have, ma'am, anything comes up in the meantime, please let us know. We don't want you to be in the dark. We want to have what we're fully intending really clear in your guys' minds as well, so we're not operating on the Jesus music. So please, let us know. You've been able to kind of talk and to help provide some clarity and context so we make it as easy for you as you can. I'm looking forward to the process.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on this, we'll move on to the next item. I'll talk a little, I've already talked mostly about it. I do plan to bring you the canine policy in May, at the May 9th. Prior to that, I intend to give you the proposed policy, the current policy, any reference documents that we've used to develop that policy, along with the elements or the particular paragraphs in the stipulated judgment that have to do with the canine policy and canine program. Is there anything else that you can think about that you would like ahead of time? Yes?
Could we do have a copy of the current law, the state law?
There is no current law on the policy, but,
Just the new proposed law.
say again?
So just the proposed law.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can include that.
Yeah.
We can include it.
However, if I still gonna.
What might not be relevant if it passed,
I
okay?
can still work on it. We can have it.
Is there data that can be shared as to how often the policy is used? Like in 2020, it was referenced 10 times or something, like in a case.
Okay, let me ask you a different way. Are you asking about canine engagements, or when you say the engagement of the policy, I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, like the use of the canine.
The use of the canine, yeah, there's data. Yeah, we actually have a report getting ready to come out soon on 2022 with regard to our uses of force. And canine engagements will be a part of that report. So yeah, there will be that data available. Huh? Yeah, yeah. Canine engagements are on the transparency portal on the police department's website. They are.
Chief,
Yeah.
you might have this already, I found some, information on policies,
Mhm.
you probably already have
Perfect.
this. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, and I,
But that's what, we're gonna give you what,
you're gonna,
we're gonna give you what we looked at and what we considered and all that kind of stuff, but it's not gonna be exhaustive, I can tell you, because there's too much information out there. So I would ask that you guys go to your work, and if you find other sources that we should consider, by all means, bring
like
all
I
them
said, I'm
forward.
sure you, exhausted all
Well,
the information gathered.
I would like
but
to
I
say
just
so,
wanted
but
to-
there's so much information out there, it's impossible.
Okay.
Truly. But yeah, I would expect that your work is going to find other documents that we didn't include, we didn't provide you, probably have looked at, maybe not, but, that is what I consider the scope of all of the work that you're gonna do.
I think it will also be helpful if you have like recommendations on how we divide ourselves. So we have, maybe we do already,
I'm trying to stay out of it.
or at least not really.
But I really want you, because I know you have your own areas of interest, and so that's why I'm here to support you, and I will do that. But I think because the panel at large is gonna have their own areas of interest, I wouldn't want to put somebody where they're not interested in
Well,
moving
not that you
somewhere else.
assign it to us, but just saying like,
How many
this
groups
K9
are we
has
gonna
these
need?
sections, people are more, interested in this part or the.
We can probably do that, we can assess how we would divide it into how many different sections and offer that up, and then you can decide. how to do it.
Yeah, that's what I mean,
That
not
we
that
can
you
do.
assign us, because I
Yeah.
think that's what took majority of the last time, like, how do we divide ourselves, what do
Okay.
we do, where do we go?
Yeah, we can offer that.
Yeah, you can start there.
Yeah. I mean, if we were gonna look at it, knowing how certain sections are connected, others aren't, that we could separate that, we could offer that up, for sure.
And probably the apprehension is probably the apprehension section is probably focus, because that's.
The scope of the policy is really going to be, it's gonna be, yeah, how do we select the people who have dogs, and how do we train, and how do we select the supervisors, and what, it's the whole thing, the entirety of the program. On the day that we present the proposed policy to you, make the initial presentation, what I intend to do is, it won't be me, it'll be, actually it might be Sergeant Ryan McWilliams. He's here tonight, because he'll probably be presenting to you next time, in May. And so, it will be a brief overview of what the proposed policy is. We're gonna give just the highlights of what kind of general themes of what the proposed policy is. We're not gonna go line by line or anything like that. We want you to go back and take all of the information and do your own review and assessment. My question is, and what I intended to have as part of that presentation, is a brief overview of what our canine unit is like how big it is, and some of those kinds of things that you might, what kind of dogs we have, but some very basic things about the canine unit that might just be useful information to orient you a little bit to that. Yes, Tiffany.
Do we know the rationale as to why they're proposing changing the canine policy state level?
Yeah, I think that there is a desire to eliminate the canines from law enforcement work in the area of apprehension on an individual. And I think that's the intention. I think pretty much the scope of what's being proposed up there is for that. To still utilize them in some other areas, but not utilize them to apprehend people.
I guess I just would have to outline my research as to, because for me, it's like, okay, why take it from apprehension? Did something happen? Was there an increase? Well, a lot of stuff always happens, like if somebody, of just, how bad was it, what happened, where did it happen at?
I would
And all
tell
that
you,
stuff, I guess
I'm
I
not
would
sure I'm the
have to
right
do the
person to ask that.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
But
I would have to do
the other
research
part
on
of it,
that.
yeah, I would encourage you to do that, because I don't think it was one event.
Yes.
I think those that are advocating for it don't believe fundamentally that it's the right thing to have and to do. And then and I'm sure that there are incidents as well that come from that. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of what's driving the conversation in the proposed bill, but I don't think it was one incident.
Yeah, no, not one incident, but just like the totality, thank you, I have retainers in, so a lot of stuff is just like really hard for me to pronounce right now. Thank you. But just like the overall, like, because you have to, there has to be something backing why you're trying to change this policy. You have to do the research, you have to show that there's these strategic things, and this is why I'm proposing this with any laws that you, bring up, and I know that it's there. I just need to, I'll find it and,
I couldn't agree more.
see.
I would agree with
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, would it be helpful, because I know that, one of the, like, either the first or the second meeting, I think some of the suggestions were like actual hearing, like what you guys are gonna do, present on the policy, but also having other experts talk about either the state law or there's other things, just so we have a better understanding of what we're going in to review and discuss and make suggestions on. Would it be helpful, I know this is just a bill, so that's, I didn't suggest that somebody present on it, but would it be helpful to have somebody who supports the bill come and say, you know, I guess answer some of the questions that you have and discuss like what is the biggest change you can bring and stuff like that?
Oh, no, I can
Or
just
not?
research it. I'm good. For me, I'm good. If everybody else would need that, I just figured that it was something that you may have known.
I would
But if not,
encourage, I would
will
encourage
go-
you,
I'll
as you
look it
work
up.
through the panel, is to do
Yeah.
your research.
Yeah.
Because I think fundamentally, you're going to
That's-
arrive
that's right.
at wherever
Yes.
you are, but I also want to have the work of the panel be focused that, you're here to provide us input and for us to have some engagement over our proposed policy that is consistent with the law as it is today. And is it consistent with the stipulated judgment? Is our proposed policy making the changes, the improvements that the stipulated judgment says it is? That's really one of your core responsibilities. Getting into the other policy elements and sort of opportunities or discretion that the police department has, happy to have those conversations. But the work of the panel specifically is to give us feedback on this policy as it's proposed. Is it consistent with the stipulated judgment? If it's not, how should we and could we align it with it? But then also beyond that, should we align it with some other best practices that aren't in the stipulated judgment? Are there other ways for us to make improvements to make it the best policy that it can be? So for me, that's the scope of the panel, is to do all of those kinds of things and absolutely do your independent research so that you can arrive at, again, you may individually have differences on where you stand on this issue, but what I would like and what I would ask from the panel is some recommendations back that give us some indication that our proposed policy is consistent with the stipulated judgment. I'm not asking you to find or make a statement necessarily, but that is some of the feedback that we need from you is, yes, it's aligned, no, it isn't. It is in this area. This needs more clarity. We think you should do this in this particular area. That's the work of the panel and the responsibilities of the panel for all of the policies going forward. So that's what I would ask you to do.
And I think that's understanding the scope, and we're not looking at what the law could be or
Right.
may be, or the intent of the law.
Right.
That's not the goal of this, it's to look at what the policy is and align it to the stipulated judgment, and that's where our.
Yeah.
But I would say that what we agreed on the first two meetings was that, and again, Canine is separate, Canine is different, but I think specifically for like the use of force, have other experts, talk about state law, talk about best practice.
Yeah, I'm not
talk about
opposed to
social work.
having that happen, for sure.
Well, that's not like
Because that's,
politics. That's
but-
not like politics. If you've got state
But then that is
experts,
state law.
if you've
Well,
got
what-
state experts and stuff coming in, now we get into politics.
what I would, sorry, Eugene, what I would bring forward is, though, somebody who can answer things very technically. If there's a technical need in a particular area of how this is defined, that's what I would agree to. If it's just a philosophical thing, then no. I think I would agree with you that that's not the work of this panel, that it needs to be focused and very specific. But there are some technical things that we're going to come across that may be helpful for you because there's different levels of experience and understanding of some of these different areas, and there might be valuable to have a technical expert come in and talk about a very specific area of law or of something else, of human thinking or there's a variety of areas that I can see it possibly happening. But not to come in and advocate for a particular position one way or the other. That's not the work of the panel. Okay, anything else that we need to cover for tonight? And you can either have the room or we can give you back the time. Yes.
Quick question about, Jacob had asked, are the videos of the previous meetings on the website? Have you couldn't find them?
Oh, yes.
Where are they at?
If you go to our hometown website, it's on the transparency page, under the community advisory channel tab.
Okay.
The minutes and the video should be there.
Transparency page.
Under community advisory.
All right. You said, yeah, we would ask for it.
Okay, if you have any questions over the next couple of weeks, like you said, Brian offered that, please reach out. And if you have questions about things, we'll do our best to support you and clarify them and get it back to you right away so your work can continue, and we'll continue to make some progress. Okay, thank you all for being here.